everybody. Welcome to the Drew Grimaldi podcast. We have a very special guest with us today to discuss some very, very interesting topics. Ladies and gentlemen, Ashton Forbes, the man, the myth, the legend himself. How are you?
Hey, doing well, Drew. How are you doing?
Good, good. Hey, I appreciate you coming on. So you have been doing some amazing research on the missing Malaysian airline flight. So I've seen these videos out there, and, you know, anytime something comes out like that, that has, you know, any type of, people always jump at it to discredit it so quickly. But you had went after and you found some of the satellite imagery from that time. So tell me about that. Like, you know.
Yeah. So first of all, of course, for something, a situation where, you know, you've got the biggest missing airline, biggest controversy in terms of a missing plane ever in history, you're going to have people of all sides with lots of different opinions for sure. And there's a lot of people that have come out pretty harshly against me for sure, specifically for my research and what I found. Now, what I found was nothing special, same thing that everybody found on the internet. This is a very important point because it shows this is open source information. It shows this leak of information was actually from real military people. It wasn't a situation where somebody came out as a whistleblower. It was a situation where somebody leaked something on the internet, and then we had to reverse engineer what it was to figure out exactly what we're looking at, because us as public people from the public perspective, we have no idea what military surveillance looks like.
Right.
You know, other than what they curate and give to us, which they only show us what they want us and allow us to see.
Right.
So there are two videos that appeared on the internet that had been on the internet since 2014. This has been confirmed since right after the plane disappeared, but they only gained popularity in 2023. That's when I saw the videos. One of them is called Satellite Video, Airliner and UFOs. Early on, people were saying, like, why is this even MH370? Why is this even the missing plane? The only reason why everybody associates those videos with the missing plane right now is because I've pushed to show people that is literally the missing plane in those videos. The video itself said satellite video, so everyone assumes we're looking at a satellite video. We're looking down on this plane, and this plane's relatively tiny on the screen, so you're thinking you're looking down at a satellite video like Enemy of the State, like Will Smith and Gene Hackman in the 90s movie where they're tracking everybody via satellite. But that's not how satellites work. So I had to do a lot of work, years worth of work, as you pointed out, to understand that's actually something called wide area motion imagery. And it's a drone. It's a drone, actually, that's above. And the plane is just not flying at 40,000 feet. The plane's flying down at like 5,000 feet, something very low in that video. And the drone's above it. And the drone is actually, the way this software works is it's software. It's not like it's a camera. It's not like a video camera recording. It's software that's taking hundreds of photos all the time. And then they beam that data through a satellite to a ground-based computer. And the ground-based computer puts it all together and turns it into like Google Earth video playback. So it actually is like even better than Enemy of the State capabilities because they can rewind and they can open up multiple windows. So you have this, you have this giant field of view, maybe like a whole city field of view, and you press on the screen. And when you press on the screen, a window pops up. And now you're watching another new window that's independent of the thing going on in the background that can be rewound and changed. And that's what we're looking at in one of the videos. That's what the satellite video is. It's not satellite video at all. It's a drone, and it's somebody has one of those windows popped up, and they're tracking a certain area of the world that right where the plane is at.
So all the things too that tried to debunk you, they all said that it was satellite. They never said it was a drone.
Yeah, that was the thing, and that's funny because we didn't figure out about the drone situation. I didn't figure out about the drone situation until like last year. Really? And so it was like a year and a half into the investigation before we figured that out. And it was actually famously Ross Coulthart of News Nation who put this video out. He had never spoken about the videos, never spoken about me publicly, puts this like 3-minute hit piece thing on me where he doesn't get the debunks even correct, says that he spoke to his secret source in the NSA and that's not consistent with satellite video. And then literally 2 days later, we find out it's whammy, it's not satellite video. And I confront him over that because, hey, you said you had a secret source that knows that's not satellite. Well, how come they didn't tell you that's a drone video? Because that's what it turned out to be. he goes completely silent, has never mentioned it ever since then.
That's
Even
wild.
though I called him out publicly to millions of views on the internet, he won't say anything about it. This is where I got to point out and just say here, those videos are real, and that's why people are acting this way. That's why you'll have a guy who's an anchor on TV claim he's got a secret source in the government, and his secret source doesn't even tell him what it is, but we're able to figure out what it is.
Right.
You know, like, should you trust someone like that? No, you should never trust anybody like that with anything.
Yeah, no, I don't like the independent, anonymous source type things, because when you have these anonymous sources, like, you could say anything and make it, hey, this is so on the plane.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Let me say there's one more video too, because there's two videos, and then the other video is I forget actually what it said on the name of that video off the top of my head, like UAV second, but in the description it says this is a second video that goes along with the first video. And this second video was released we looked at the Internet Archives. The first one came out March 19th. So this is like 2 months after the plane disappears. It gets published. And then the second video gets published like 2 weeks later. So there's like a time frame going on with these leaks of these videos if you just look back historically. And keep in mind, we're looking back historically 10 years. Like, this is already,
and leaks always happen.
We're looking back.
Yeah.
And so, we had to learn about how leaks occur as well, and that's a whole other side of the story. But the second video is another drone video, and this one's clearly a drone video because you can see the drone in the video. You're clearly looking at a camera that's under the wing, and you can see the nose of the drone. And these drones have this very distinct bubble head on them.
Right.
Turns out the computer in the nose of the head of the drone or whatever, the nose of the drone, that's actually a SATCOM relay. And it turns out in one of the videos it says NROL 22 in the bottom left, like where you see my name over here. It says NROL 22, which is the relay satellite. It's a real relay satellite that we beam information because they have these long orbits. So it basically sits above the North Pole, which is perfect for relaying information. So I don't know how people have been nice, but anyway, the second video, clearly a Reaper drone video. Right. The only question is what kind of camera are we looking at? And we're looking at color rainbow FLIR. So color infrared.
Right.
Which we know commercially we've seen that before, but from the military it's never been revealed. We've never seen anything like that.
Right.
So it took a while to figure out, and I had a source that claimed to have worked at China Lake where they test the drones. And the reason why I believe them, because I don't like to be one of these unnamed sources, because they're the ones who also confirmed Gorgon Stare. Like, when I found out about Gorgon Stare, which was the wide area motion imagery, I went back through my replies and I started looking through people that were trying to tell me it was Gorgon Stare. And sure enough, I find somebody. I hit them up, and they're like, I asked them, what do you think the other camera is? And they're like, oh, I think it's a Litany G4 by Northrop Grumman. Look it up, perfect match. Boom. Just like that. Crazy. Like, that's what it is. Got it. Even has a picture-in-picture view, where at one point in the second video, the plane goes off the screen, and the operator, suddenly when the plane comes back on the screen, it's zoomed in now. So that means the operator was somehow still seeing the plane while it was out of view of the video we're seeing, and they were able to zoom in and be tracking the plane still so that it would come into view perfectly, which means they had a second view.
And why were they tracking the plane? And why were they tracking the plane? To have that type of footage.
Yeah, why were they there?
Yeah.
It's the big question everybody asks. Why were they there? Well, it's because here's the rub of this now. This is what it took a while to figure out. Those are Air Force assets, but those are CIA controlled. Now, the CIA has a bunch of MQ-9 Reaper drones. We're looking at 2 of them in those videos. And the way we know this is because those surveillance assets weren't publicly available. Like, as in the Gorgon Stare that we're looking at, it wasn't until 2 months after those videos were on the internet that the Air Force officially announced that was operational system, the integrated, increment 2 of that system. That's Northrop Grumman one, that wasn't until 2016 that they announced that those cameras were integrated onto MQ-9 Reapers.
Wow.
That exact camera, by the way. And it's like the only camera that's integrated onto an MQ-9 Reaper, other than the one that goes under the nose. So I think maybe there's one more camera as well. But when I looked into it, it was obvious that this is what's going on, is that they are sequestering this technology, this surveillance stuff before.
Oh, shit. What the hell just happened?
So that's CIA footage on there, which, given the context, and it's, you can work backwards from the other context, Why are they recording it all? Because that's an operation. The whole thing's an operation on the plane, like everything about it. They're not randomly out there. Some people are like, do you think that drones are out there recording every spot of the ocean? No, no, of course not, guys. There's only one reason why those drones are there, and that's because that's an operation start to finish, and it's a CIA operation, and it's CIA assets.
So those orbs around the plane, what do you think those were?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I know exactly, but I know very, very likely what they are. They're fusion reactors. They're fusion reactors. So the simplest possible explanation is it's not aliens flying around in little balls of plasma. They're just fusion reactors, and it's all tied to nuclear weapons, right? So they figured out fusion, and they just didn't tell us. I mean, think of it this way. How long did it take for us to develop the nuclear bomb? Like 4 years from the Manhattan Project? How long was that?
Right.
Before we dropped it in 1945? They've had 80 years since then to figure out fusion.
Right.
You don't think they could figure that out at 80? We could figure out the nuclear bomb in 4 years, but we can figure out the fusion in 80?
Right. Or
Like,
even
they
learn to
figured
go
out
from
fusion.
flying to go to the moon in 60 or whatever. You know.
So they figured out fusion is the secret, and I mean they take it obviously a few steps further if you look at those videos. But when we see these plasma orbs, I don't know why more people weren't able to figure this out. I think some were, but you look at it and you can tell you're not looking at a solid structured craft. You're looking at it looks like a sphere, but you've got this heat signature in there that almost matches the temperature of the air. It's blue, it's really light, and it's almost transparent in some cases. Right. So you're like, oh, I'm looking at some kind of fuzzy material. Well, that's plasma. And you're looking at plasma that's being encased not by a solid object, but by a magnetic field. That's why it looks kind of fuzzy, like around the edges. And then that's why you see this heat signature in the inside, because it's a machine that you're looking at. It's something that is heating up on the inside because it's a machine that, like an engine, essentially, but it's a much more advanced engine than what you have in your car.
Right.
You know, it's a heat exchange and a fusion reactor that's happening in the middle. I would also say, because some people say, Ashton, you throw buzzwords out. No, the things that I'm saying, it's literally what these things are. It's also a particle accelerator, like the Large Hadron Collider, like the CERN thing, where we were afraid that was going to create a black hole that was going to suck us all in.
Well, we're still thinking about that. We're still not sure about
maybe
that.
We should be thinking about it, because those videos are what really happens. That's a real life experiment right there.
Right. Did you see that they just admitted in CERN that they teleported particles recently? It was like a brand new story.
It's exactly the physics that I'm talking about, is that what they're realizing is that these implosive fusion effects, inertial confinement fusion, when we're doing an implosive effect versus an explosive effect, where's that going? Is it possible that we can actually push the matter inward so far that it shoots out somewhere else? Right?
Interesting.
If that's possible, like, that would be a wormhole. If that's possible, that could also explain quantum entanglement. Why suddenly we see these two different points in time and space act somewhat the same.
Right. So what is the whole thing too with and because you're the expert on the physics. So like they were talking about how either protons, electrons can be in two places at one time.
Mm-hmm.
Is that accurate?
So I guess the better way, you're talking about like the double slit experiment, which is the wave function in terms of not knowing where something is going to be. And this goes back to quantum mechanics. So I guess from this point, what we'd be saying is that if we look and say, if an object, if we're going to, before we measure an object, the object could be in any of these locations. But then when we measure the object, this wave function has to break down. And now it must exist in only one of these locations at a single point in time. To some level, what you could say, what they're doing to the plane, is that they're having the plane go from a definitive point to being a obscure point where it could exist in any one of these locations, and then doing a measurement which now causes it to exist in this particular location, collapses down all the other locations down to that particular point. So from a quantum mechanics perspective, that would be the basis for teleportation. Like, why is it even possible that something like this can even occur?
Yeah.
You would say, well, quantum mechanics says that nothing's really there until you measure it in a specific location, and then it collapses down.
And some people say that there's nothing there. Everything's just, matter, particles and electrons, and, there's dark space between everything, right? Or am I wrong on that?
Sure, of course, people say anything. People say anything and everything. I think the question is what makes sense to you from a physical understanding of our reality. Science is just how we explain our physical reality. So when in doubt, we should always go look back at experimentation. But my view, when I look at the MH370 videos and I see 3 spinning fusion reactors spinning around the plane, converging on it, zapping it out of the sky, first thing I think is nuclear weapons, because that's basically how nuclear weapons work, and that's the whole point of thermonuclear weapons is compressing down onto a target. But the other thing I think about is the idea of the ether. The idea of like, whoa, what did they just do there? How did something like vanish that looks like it was there, but it's not anymore? Right. And I think, oh, there must be an extra dimension. I must not be perceiving something that's really there, but I don't see it.
Right.
Right. Like the way where the plane almost looks like it goes through a mirror, like, and it's just not there anymore. That seems impossible to our minds because our minds live in this 3-dimensional reality. But if we for a second assume it's not impossible, then the answer is, oh, there's an extra dimension that we don't perceive. So now if we look at it from that perspective, you have a whole new basis for how you want to look at the universe, life itself, existence itself. The way I look at it is that we, everything, are low entropy beings that are out of equilibrium. We're energy that's been pulled from the ocean of energy, and we live in this temporary state separated from the ocean of energy. And somehow, however you believe from your religion or whatever spiritual understanding, we turned into what you see now, which is an organic being that is self-sustaining, self-thinking, sentient, self-replicating.
Right. People that build.
There you go. That's my philosophical approach.
I like it. I like it. I like it. No.
So here's the thing, though. We got fusion reactors. I mean, so the moment I tell somebody that, they say, we've got fusion reactors and we can teleport something with our fusion reactors, people should stop caring about aliens. I mean, who cares now about aliens? You just told me we've got fusion reactors that can make black holes, because that's what the plane is doing. A wormhole is a black hole. So when we were worried about CERN zapping the universe away with a black hole, it wasn't completely unfounded, but we were wrong, because the black hole wasn't going to be able to absorb enough mass to be self-perpetuating. The universe wants to correct itself. It wants to go back into equilibrium. So it's almost like taking a cup of water out of the ocean. Well, is the hole in the ocean going to stay there? No. The water is going to fill in that hole in that ocean like instantaneously, like before you can even pull the water out, basically.
Right.
Same idea with the black holes. Like, yes, theoretically you can make a black hole. You can make a doomsday weapon, but you got to engineer it correctly, because otherwise it's just going to dissipate right away, like what we see happen with the MH370 plane. Right. So in theory, you could do that, but here's the problem. Now you're saying that the same engineering, same physics at least, can go from making that wormhole into a bomb that can possibly, make a black hole, annihilate us all.
Well, that's what I was thinking too. In terms of like government, they probably like the idea of a wormhole, just because, hey, if you don't have to send a missile somewhere, you can just, it's there, boom. They probably think that's a great idea.
This is something nobody's ever really brought up, actually, but I thought about is that, how did they even think of doing this? It's actually very logical, is that they were thinking about, how do you make a deterrent for a nuclear weapon? You just nailed it. What's the ultimate deterrent for a nuclear weapon? Why even bother shooting it down? How about we just send it back to you? How about it shows up on your doorstep, right? This is the stuff they were thinking about. And I know for sure they were, because I've been reading about all the engineers, about the aerospace companies, about their relationships with the CIA and the military, and what the military wants. They have these specific objectives they're trying to achieve for every iteration of every aircraft they make. It's like, of course, they were thinking like, hey, we want something that can stop a nuclear weapon. We want something that's the ultimate deterrent. We want something that can stop any weapon they shoot at us. Right. And they go, and then they get some, science nerds in there and say, okay, you know what the best thing is? A wormhole. And everybody goes, okay, well, that's crazy. Can we do that? And they're like, well, maybe we
just
can.
Send it right back to them. That's like some badass shit.
It's really badass.
Send it right back at them. I could definitely see that. I didn't even think about that. But you're right. That'd be the biggest deterrent
warp nuke.
Yeah. That's
warp
funny.
nuke. But yeah, so this is why when I look at it, the MH370 videos are a very nuanced political situation. Because I'm also fairly sure we didn't just randomly decide to orb that plane, zap that plane. It was like, hey guys, time to zap a random civilian airliner. There was something more going on.
Right.
And
There
what
was a lot of
more
people
going
on the plane. There was a lot of people that were on the plane that were wanted or
And this whole
other
thing is like the reason why all the weird cover up, the reason why all the bizarre information coming from Malaysia is that this was like the big dogs were stomping all over everybody. Which means this is Russia, China. This is our intelligence apparatuses, the most powerful intelligence apparatuses, just stomping all over everybody, telling everybody what they're going to say, what they're going to do. This is why all the Malaysian ministers of defense sound so sketchy. This is why they were like, well, this is all going to come out later on. Don't ask any questions right now. And everybody's thinking they're totally incompetent. No, it was actually just a cover up. And, and the United States was just pressuring them, strong-arming them to, not say anything about what they knew and to hide all the evidence that implicated the United States.
There was somebody on the plane that was a physicist. That wasn't it? Wasn't there something like that? There was somebody that was on the plane that was a physicist.
I mean, there was 20 engineers. So the way that played out is there are these 20 engineers, and 8 of them are Chinese nationals. The moment I find this, I'm like, okay, what? Like 20 engineers that work for American defense contractor, microchip company,
that's
semiconductors. And at the time, the conspiracy theorists were all over this too, by the way. Because like the first thing you ask is like, who's on the plane? And there's 20 of them. And some of them had their whole families with them. And so now, the narrative is they were defecting or they were, they weren't going to come back from China, basically. So that's why they were bringing their families with them. They either had the technology in their head or they had it on them. Heck, it might not even be that important, the technology. The CIA might have just used this as an opportunity to strike back at China for like constantly trying to steal our technology.
Right. Instead of shooting down a plane, you just make one disappear. Instead of shooting down a plane, you just make one disappear.
Yeah. I mean, because how scary is that? That's the scariest thing you could possibly imagine.
It's horrifying.
Especially if you are the adversary's intelligence agency and you can't even explain what they did. You're like, we don't even know what they did. Like, the plane's just gone now, but we know they did it, but we just don't know what they did. Right? Like, that was the play, I think, that they wanted to do. And this is why you don't do it. You don't use this weaponry in wars. One of the most common questions I get, why don't we use this in Iran? Why don't we use this? Well, we kind of do. Venezuela, I mean, what do you think? We just had 8 helicopters roll up into their capital city without using any advanced technology? Right. Like, we were at least using the discombobulator to shut down their technology, right? And I guarantee it's not conventional physics that they're employing there. Right. At least not in total.
Do you think that the government has achieved zero point energy? Like,
0 point energy is a physics explanation that explains the extra dimension. So 0 point energy is classically agreed to exist. It's the lowest energy state. But here's the problem. The reason why 0 point energy is even a word that we talk about is because it's not really the lowest energy state. This is why it's called 0 point energy. Because if you take all the heat, all the energy out of an empty cube of space, there's still energy in there. That's why we call that energy 0 point energy.
Interesting.
And so classic people would say, well, if there's nothing there, how can there be energy there? How can there be electromagnetic fields there?
Right.
And if you ask Leonard Susskind, who's one of the top PhD physicists in the world, he'll say he can't explain that. Nobody can.
Have you ever heard?
Yeah, go ahead.
Have you ever heard of the Searle generator?
Yeah, magnetic motor.
And there was another one too, but it was like a 0 point. It was like a 0 point energy thing, and the government basically shut it down because people would just kept plugging things in, and the more they plugged into it, the more it would produce energy wise, I guess.
So here's the simple answer: this extra 0 point energy gets around thermodynamics. This is why classic physicists want to dismiss it, because the laws of thermodynamics only apply in a closed system, meaning a system that has a box around it. But if you now say this 0 point energy also needs to be included into your calculations, you've now opened your system up to that excess energy. Now the question is, how much energy is that? Is that enough energy that can come out? So obviously the people, the Searle generator, the magnetic motor people, the other 0 point, they all say that it's a large amount of energy. This is the debate. In fact, it's called the vacuum catastrophe. There's a whole word for it because when physicists did the math, guess what? They found out that 0 point energy is infinite, literally infinite.
Right.
That's when
Energy's
they
out
did the
there.
math. So then they had to renormalize it because they were like, well, we don't see the energy, so we have to change this. Literally, this is all true, by the way. They had to change it. So they just dumb it down and they change it to a very small number. They go, okay, well, now it's just this really tiny number, and this makes more sense because this is what we see with our eyes.
0.
Like, is that science? No, that's not science. Right. And so there's a difference between the calculation of 0 point energy that's roughly about 100 orders of magnitude or 80 orders of magnitude. So depending on which side of the fence you fall, you either...
Oh, I lost you. Oh, there you go. You're back. No. Can you hear me? I lost you there for a second.
Yeah, either believe the 0 energy is huge, believe that it's...
You're breaking up a little bit here. Hang on. Let's see if we can get it back. Come on, computer. There you go. All right. Can you hear me? Son of a bitch.
Engineers have figured out ways to tap into it. The simplest way to tap into it is fusion. Fusion is the simplest way to tap into it. Why? Because I just told you that 0 point energy is electromagnetic. You know what else is electromagnetic? Plasma. Plasma is also electromagnetic. So when we're doing fusion, it would make total sense that plasma would be interacting with 0 point energy and possibly, in some ways, pulling that out like a tap, just like a oil pump pulls oil out of the water or out of the ground. So I think we're going to find, personally, this is my prediction. I don't think I've seen many other people predict it, that when we start turning on these fusion reactors, we're going to see anomalous excess energy. They're going to probably come up with some bullshit explanation, but it's I don't know, it's the moonbeams from Venus, but it's going to be from 0 point energy.
Interesting. So do you think that the government has stopped some of these energy generating things from coming out just because they think it'll hurt the oil markets or something like that?
Yeah, like for sure, 100%. I mean, number one, magnetic motors. So magnetic motors suddenly they go from being pseudoscience to now free energy becomes possible through resonance and through powerful magnetic fields and spin. And that's not currently classically accepted, but if there is an extra source of 0 point energy, then now that becomes theoretically possible. And now you go, oh, so all those people like the Searle generator and those people that were doing magnetic motors and they say that's all working, but you just didn't want to believe it, even though you could see with your eyes, like, oh, that's all real now? Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be a big surprise. It really shouldn't be a big surprise for people. Turns out all the people that were showing you experiments, that were building stuff, doing their time, spending their time, they weren't all just making it up.
Right.
Turns out there really was something there. Wow, big surprise. Just goes to show that humans are not that intelligent in general, and we like to feel smarter than we are,
right.
And we like to put down other people and pretend like we're smarter than we are, when in reality we won't just look at the experimentation. So another good example is Randall Mills of brilliant light power. Because you might say, Ashton, well, if plasma interacts with 0 point energy, there must be some experiments that we can do that will prove that this is real. Yeah, Randall Mills already did them. They already did them. They've already done all the experiments. Randall Mills did the experiments. He showed the anomalous excess energy, heat energy, and using a calorimeter, just calculates temperature. And he also showed that you could see in the spectrometry results, you could see the energy level of the hydrogen atom change. And this is what you would expect. If you were manipulating space-time, you would expect the energy level of the atom to actually either go up or down, depending on what you're doing. And so he has the results that prove that too. And they're peer-reviewed. You had experts look at them. And how does academia treat it? They just ignore it. They just say, well, there's some other explanation. We can't come up with it, but we'll come up with another explanation for why that is the case.
That's wild. It's amazing. Now, let me ask you this. Do you think the government has been able to engineer anti-gravity propulsion systems?
Yeah, that's what I'm telling you. That's exactly what those fusion reactors are. So here's the thing. This is what people have to start wrapping their brain around. These fusion reactors, these particle accelerators, they are anti-gravity devices. That's what anti-gravity is. Anti-gravity is not an exotic alien thing that we're looking for. And there is no what do they say for the negative energy? They call it exotic mass or whatever. They call it
Right.
the dumbest thing possible
Instead
to
of
make it sound like
antimatter.
it's not
Yeah.
real.
Yeah,
You
right.
literally might as well just call it like Harry Potter substance. And antimatter is
Right.
different than negative energy, actually. And the idea of negative energy is linked to the idea of how the universe is expanded. Because we know or we claim the universe expanded faster than the speed of light. Well, how is that possible? Speed of light is supposed to be the limit, right?
Right.
So somehow there's a way for that to occur. Well, the answer is you move the medium. Move the medium instead of the object. If I pick you up in a cup in the medium and I move that over here, you're not moving. It's me moving you.
Right.
So, um, negative energy is this idea of if I take a cup of that water out of the ocean, that ocean fills in on itself.
Right.
There's your negative energy. So what do I want to do? I want to take a cup out of the ocean and I want to ride that wave. That's your negative energy. So negative energy now becomes pulling 0 point energy out of the vacuum. That's now conceptually what negative. It goes from being a Harry Potter mist to now this idea of, okay, if I want negative energy, I pull energy, real energy, out of the vacuum, and that will create a negative energy suction effect. So this is one of the biggest things that I think people have to wrap their brain around. And then remember, how do you create a black hole? You use a particle accelerator. Why? Because if you accelerate any mass, it gets heavier and heavier and heavier. So if you accelerate that mass closer and closer to the speed of light, it should get heavy enough that eventually it becomes a black hole. This is actually what we were afraid of with the particle accelerators. So they were like, oh, it's going to make a black hole. We're all going to get sucked away, right? They were partially right, but it was not enough energy to pull it off. It wasn't enough energy to pull it off. And it's not going to potentially suck us all in, although you probably make one that will. But that's gravity manipulation. That is gravity manipulation, because what did you do if you're doing that? You are making something heavier. You are adding gravity from a physics perspective. That's what you're doing there. So can they do gravity manipulation? Yes, we know we can. I'm manipulating gravity, waving my hand around. The question is, can you do it at a big enough scale
Right.
and engineer it up? And the answer to that is also yes. Look at Salvatore Pais's high energy electromagnetic field generator. Because these guys have all figured this out and said, yeah, of course you can manipulate gravity. We've learned that. The question is, can you do it to scale? And they say, oh, we can, but we need super high electromagnetic fields. Because why? Oh, the 0 point energy is electromagnetic. So we want to have super powerful electromagnetic fields focused right on that energy, and we want to force it to come out. We're going to break through that space-time barrier. Think of space-time as like a steel beam. It doesn't want to bend at all. It doesn't want to move. But if you hit it with enough energy, it will move. But we don't want to just hit it with enough random energy. We want to hit it with focused energy to just pull this thing aside, right? Where we can make a wormhole where we can just slip right on through. So this requires engineering. This requires precise control. And not just a big boom. So a nuclear weapon isn't enough. In theory, you can tell that a nuclear weapon can put a dent in the steel beam. But we want to engineer the steel beam. We want to make this steel beam wobbly. We want to make it easier to manipulate.
Right.
And then we want to make a gap in it. So fusion is the perfect answer for that. In fact, almost certainly in the middle of those orbs, there's like a little black hole or some kind of gravitational well that's occurring in those orbs. So fusion, 0 point energy, extracting 0 point energy is directly tied to gravity manipulation. When you're changing the gravity, when you're changing space-time, you're manipulating gravity.
What would be the mechanism for that? So I've heard things of different, where they put like mercury running through it,
Yep.
something like that. Like what would the, breakdown of something like that? Like what would you need to make something like that?
Trying to remember why mercury was the secret sauce. I think it has to do with it's got some unique properties related to it, but it has to do with electromagnetism. So in almost all these situations, you're pulsing an electromagnetic current through a medium. Even in fusion, actually, that they're doing that. It's a very short-lived electromagnetic pulse that they do to produce this stuff. So that's from a general perspective, the connection between gravity and electromagnetism is the key. So Ferris Williams is the guy that corrected the nuclear weapons calculations, said there's an extra dimension. That's what we missed. That's why we didn't get correct nuclear weapons calculations. And when he presented his ideas, they said, well, does this explain the quantization of electric charge? He says, does this explain why electric charge is the same on the big scale as it is on the tiny scale?
Hmm.
And he goes, yeah, actually, this extra dimension does explain that. But if that's the case, then that means that gravity and electromagnetism must have some connection. There must be a connection between charge and electromagnetism. And if that's the case, then a warp drive now becomes inevitable. Because if I can control gravity with electromagnetism, then a warp drive, a wormhole, any of these things that manipulate space-time, I need to figure out the key of electromagnetism. And the secret of, okay, we know electromagnetism is it. But, what's the right frequency? What's the right recipe? This is where we would look at the photoelectric effect. Einstein. When Einstein was trying to quantize light, he was like saying, well, how does light work? We looked at the photoelectric effect. He came to this conclusion that light is a quantum packet of light. And that we could change the size of this spoon, and then when the light interacts with the object, this changes why the outcome of the collision that occurs. But he was wrong. It was not the size of the spoon that mattered. What was happening, it was a resonance effect. If you imagine that this thing over here is a wave and this thing over here is a wave, depending on the shapes of these waves, they might either violently react or there might be like little to no reaction when they meet. That is the secret of what Einstein missed from his photoelectric effect.
Interesting.
Is that everything really is waves, and resonance is what determines if things interact strongly or if they interact weakly. So resonance is the thing that we should be looking for. If we want to figure out an electromagnetic effect that's going to manipulate gravity, we shouldn't just be saying, hey, just turn it up really high. That'll give us more gravity. Think, I wonder if there's a coupling, a resonance, a condition, a certain frequency. If we hit that frequency, now all of a sudden the effects become much higher. This was also seen in fusion when they were testing cold fusion ideas. The one idea that I think is correct is the transmission resonance model. And what they found is that certain frequencies, you pulse the current at certain frequencies, the cross-section of fusion suddenly skyrockets. Suddenly fusion happens way more often at certain frequencies. I think that directly speaks to this idea of being accurate.
Interesting. So let me ask you this question now that we're talking about frequencies. So Tesla said that frequencies were really important to him. He thought that they were healing, that they would be fundamental for a lot of the things. Do you think, with frequency and stuff like that, do you think that there's more science there that they haven't really let out yet on that? In terms of frequencies?
The specific thing that they missed on that is the scalar potential, Maxwell's equations. So when you hear them say that there's an error in Maxwell's equations, it's because we simplified Maxwell's equations down to 4. And when we did that, we threw out something called the scalar potential. And the reason why this is important is because this would be the representation of the ether, how the waves flow through the ether. And while this scalar potential may be a very small component, it's still a component. And even a small component, when scaled up, can now become very significant. So getting rid of the scalar component was essentially equivalent to renormalizing zero-point energy. It was just, we're going to make this simpler. We don't want to deal with this. But those are the areas that we should be looking at if we're trying to figure out how do you manipulate gravity, the thing that we can't understand currently. Well, did we simplify some physics that maybe we shouldn't have simplified? Oh, turns out we did. And we did that with Maxwell's electromagnetic equations. We simplified it to make it easier, and then we therefore made it impossible for us to manipulate gravity, but still do everything else we do right now, which is stream, have lights, everything else.
Now, let me ask you this question. So, have you heard of Bob Lazar, obviously, right?
Yeah, of course.
So, he said that he reversed engineered an alien craft, and he was talking about how everything in there was a special material, a special metal, and then all of a sudden, years later, on the elemental chart, they're like, oh yeah, there's one over here that actually does kind of exist. You know,
Yeah.
do you think that there's more metals out there that we haven't even figured out yet? Something like
That
that
could
that
be
could
a
just be
whole different
completely
angle.
game changing, just game
Could be a whole
changing.
different angle to propulsion that I'm not even aware of. But my view has been that we don't need any of that. When you look at the orbs in the MH370 videos, there's no the onboard fuel supply is almost none. And that's one of the big advantages. I mean, when you look at rocket technology in general, the onboard fuel supply is the main limiting factor. If you can get rid of that, it solves almost all the problems.
Right.
So you're not going to put a super heavy element in your vehicle. I mean, that's the opposite of what you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to get lighter and lighter and lighter, you don't want to have a higher thing. But maybe there is an aspect to that. Just kind of like how you can use fission for power. Nuclear power basically uses fission, but we can also do fusion. But they're both nuclear power. They're just opposites. So in theory, I think you certainly could do something like that. And I think Bob Lazar is telling the truth. I think he really did have that experience. I think he was really hired by EG&G. I think he doesn't have formal education, and maybe he was embarrassed by that. Maybe he lied. I don't know. But I think he definitely had that experience. But I don't think he really understands the physics.
No.
Like, I think he was classically trained on physics, and I think he was an open-minded guy, which is why they hired him. But I don't think he ever spent the effort afterwards to try to understand, who are the people that have this out there, and how did they figure this out? What does this all mean? Because I know that somebody spoke to him and asked him about 0 point energy, and he didn't think it was real. And I just go, well, that's crazy, because it's like the explanation for exactly the stuff that you're talking about. But it makes sense, because he would never have talked to somebody that would know about that, like Hal Puthoff or whatever. He would never have had contact with those kinds of people or anyone at that level when he was being employed.
Interesting. So,
And that's why I have to tell people, is like, you should listen to those stories and say, okay, this person can be telling the truth, but it doesn't mean that everything they're telling you is gospel. It doesn't mean that they're the be all end all of how the physics works.
right.
And I think I haven't watched the Rogan interview yet. I'm going to watch it later today. But apparently he struggles on the physics explanations, which I'm not surprised by, because I can just tell he's not a kind of guy that was like, hey, I'm going to go try to figure that out. I am that kind of guy, though. When I saw the MH370 videos, I was like, I want to know how that works, because if that's real, there should be some evidence and papers and stuff out there for that, right?
Well,
and it wasn't that hard. Like, once you know what you're looking for, like, it was pretty quick to start honing in on Hal Puthoff, Eric Davis, and these guys are all in this UFO community too, and that's not a coincidence, right?
Yeah. Well, what do you think of Greer? I can't think of his first name. He's always out there.
Dr. Stephen Greer.
Dr. Stephen Greer, yes. So he goes out in the middle of Arizona with a bunch of people, meditates, and has all of these UFOs appear. And I remember this one a few years ago. There was this guy who said, and the reporter came out and did it, and he said, I learned by reading the Bible that I start doing this, I start praying, and a UFO appears. And you hear Tucker Carlson and these guys make things that say, hey, you know what? I have an idea of what these things are. Maybe it's a spiritual thing. Maybe it's another realm. We see these things through all these different cultures, all these different, drawings in caves. I mean, so there's something there. But what do you think the UFOs are? Are they just, do you think they're other countries' drones that technology that we just didn't know that they had, or do you think there's other life out there?
It can be multiple things. I mean, I think Dr. Stephen Greer is closest, but I think the whole Bijou summoning the interdimensional alien things is kind of kooky personally, but I'm open-minded to it. I'm not against it necessarily. I just think that the bar of evidence is so high, it's going to be very difficult to prove something like that. And for me, it's more about the physics. I think my personal opinion is that they're not entirely wrong. Aliens are interdimensional in the sense that they can make a wormhole. We can make a wormhole. That's interdimensional travel. If you're able to make a wormhole and do like this and like just jump from one location to the other, that's interdimensional travel.
Right.
But that also means it's not bizarro dimension. We're not talking about bizarro dimension, everybody's got a mustache type situation. Right. We're talking about, like, it's still our reality. It's still our time continuum. You've just jumped somewhere else. And time travel becomes possible, but time travel is not like, I'm going to go back to 1984. Time travel now becomes like, I could jump to the future. Right. Or I could reverse the aging in this local process here, which might allow us to live forever. Still pretty cool, but you're not going to go back and see your great grandparents because
Right.
they're gone in our reality. They're not coming back.
Right.
So I think the physics is both limiting, but also extremely cool in terms of what it can accomplish and what we might be able to practically pull off.
Hmm.
Sorry, what was the other follow up to your question beyond
Uh,
that?
I don't remember exactly, but
Okay, keep going.
but I guess with all of it, you hear about these, like these
Oh,
orbs. Oh yeah, that was the question. Orbs.
yeah, it was about Greer. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, you know, he claims that a lot of these UFOs are other dimensions. And then you hear other people say, well, if, and you hear the religious crowd say, well, if, aliens do come, they're just demons, you know.
Yeah.
But it's to say, I truthfully believe, I mean, you talk about planet to planet, you look at Jupiter, if you looked at Jupiter's time versus our time, we would be pretty much standing still. So you have different planes of that. And so you say another dimension where you're looking out and you can see someone's life from start to end. And we can't comprehend that, but maybe there's another being out there that can,
So you just nailed a very serious aspect of the physics, which is of the gravity manipulation, which is that gravity manipulation is real, because we know it's real. The black hole, if you were near a black hole, you would experience more gravity than on Earth. But that also means your time flows differently because
Right.
gravity also determines your rate of time. So just like you said, if you were somehow able to look through a mirror at somebody who is near a black hole and they're looking at you, they would be looking at you like your time is speeding by, like you're moving in super fast forward. Right? And if you were looking at them, they would look like they're a sloth moving in super slow. But for both of you, in your own frame of reference, time would be moving normally. And those sort of
Oh no.
time, how can one person be moving slow, one person be moving super speed? That's relativity. And that's
Right.
magic. That's magic in and of itself. And if you abuse that effect, because you realize it's not just people that experience that, every atom experiences that. Every atom in this cup experiences that too. So now our fusion reactor abuses that effect as well. That's what our particle accelerator is doing. It's abusing that effect. And so we're abusing that effect for our fusion reactor, and then we're abusing that effect at the big scale when we're converging our orbs to make our plane go from one location to the next location. This is why I say we don't need new alien physics. It's just general relativity is right. The problem is general relativity is crazy as shit.
Right.
If you take general relativity to its extreme, stops making sense very quickly. So this is what I try to tell people on that front. And this is why also the idea that the aliens are going to be like these little green things that come out and like little munchkins or whatever people are thinking of, like I think that's going to be way wrong. Like I think we need to be thinking like machine super intelligences and like species that are a million years more advanced than we are that we can't even like understand their culture.
Right.
Like that's the kind of stuff that I think we're really going to end up finding when we go out there in the universe.
Do you think in this lifetime we will put men on Mars?
Yeah, but it's stupid. Who cares? Who cares about going to Mars? Like, I think we should look at this Earth and be like, this Earth was made for us. We were
Right.
made to be here on this planet and breathe this air and everything related to this. You want to go to Mars on a desert? Go live on a desert planet not made for us? Go for it. Go crazy.
Right.
What's the point? And if we can teleport, what are we really even talking about? Then why are we wasting time with stupid desert planets? Like, show me the Pandora. I want the Avatar planet or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
I want to go to a cool planet.
Right.
I don't want to go to a crappy dead desert planet.
You're
I can
right.
go anywhere we want at that point. So, yeah, I think that stuff's just kind of silly and a little bit regressive. Same as the idea that like the aliens are flying around on Atlas or 3i Atlas space rocks. Like, dude, what do you think that the aliens are like the Flintstones are out here? Like, what are we talking about? They're like less advanced than we are. Like even
Right.
we aren't flying around on space rocks.
Right.
Come on.
And it's funny
This is
too
where-
because you see that black, that thing you're just talking about floating through space, and everyone's like, it's an alien. It's like it looks like a rock. It just looks like a
Just
rock.
a rock. Not even just look at it's moving like a rock. It's
Yeah.
not even changing directions or anything. Like you
It
get
looks
back when
like a
it starts
rock.
changing directions or speeding up or slowing down. Like it's just a rock flying through the sky. What are we doing here? And
Yeah.
and just people don't we used to be dreamers. We used to dream about what we could be, or that America was going to be like the Jetsons. And now it's like the opposite. Now we're like, hey, can things be more normal? Can things be more plain?
Yeah.
Can we go back in time?
Right.
Jeez.
It's funny. I heard somebody say that in the movie The Terminator, that they said that the 2000s was the pinnacle and the peak time of civilization, and there might be some actual truth to that. Not everybody had cell phones, and
Yeah, I was talking to the Uber driver the other day about that, and that, yeah, the time before cell phones might have just been a better time in general. I think we might have been more enlightened. People were more social. People actually interacted with one another. And yeah, I think that science was in a better spot too. It's sad, but that there's not very much science in the last 30 years that I can really even look back to and really appreciate compared to the science from the 40s through the 90s. Is so much more discovery. And it's sad because a lot of the stuff that I researched, I think it goes back at least to like the 80s, if not further. So this is type of technology. We could have had this technology decades ago. Decades ago.
Well,
And
it's funny. It's funny you say that
to this day.
because they released some documents that came out where they were showing declassified concepts for like a warp drive. That they had out there, where they had this big circular thing around it where it was supposed to create a field around it so that it would become massless, so that it could actually go. I appreciated some of the physics behind it. I'm obviously not as advanced as you are, but I do try to follow.
Yeah, Salvatore Pais, I think, is the main one that people know from the U.S. Navy. He's a friend of the show, friend of mine. And I've talked to him several times. He said that he believes that MH370 videos are real and that they show his physics. And yeah, there are government agencies that have been working on these things, working on these concepts, including NASA in the late 90s that were working on these concepts, which is why it shouldn't be treated as pseudoscience, although it gets that claim for some reason, is that the government's been taking this very seriously, and they've been putting serious money into researching it for a very long time. And it's because they know there's merit to the idea. If there was no merit to the idea, they would not be wasting the time or the money on this kind of stuff, especially the government, who's very frugal about things that shouldn't work. Other than the fraud, of course. The massive fraud is a completely different story and a different problem.
Right.
So, well, we won't get into that today.
No.
So
yeah, no, but
so yeah, basically, long story short, we got teleportation technology. We have fusion technology. They're hiding it. We did it up on this operation on this plane. We covered it up. Somehow, everybody fell for the cover up. That's probably the most crazy part. Is like, we don't have a plane, but people are like, yeah, just the ocean. It's in the ocean somewhere. Like, okay, where?
Right.
Like, they searched like 5 times. They didn't find anything.
They had that team that just recently went out and said, you don't have to pay us if we don't find anything. Like, they were so confident, and they found nothing. Yeah. But
there was like 5 different people saying they knew exactly where the plane was. And I'm sitting here going like, guys, you're all going to look stupid. There are people on my replies telling me how dumb I was going to look and how my grift would be over when they find the plane. I'm going, they're not going to find that plane. And they found nothing again. And now there's no hope to even search again. And it's like, at some point, what is it going to take for people to look at 2 military videos in perfect sync by the CIA? We don't have a plane. The story never made any sense. Like, all people have to do to even prove me right is just begin to ask the government about those videos, and then the whole thing is going to unravel. But they won't even do that, which should be suspicious to people, right? Because I'm not asking a lot. I'm just asking, can you ask the government if you think these videos are real, or for a comment on the videos? I'm telling them this is Air Force Gorgon Stare wide area motion imagery. I'm being very specific about what it is. Nope. Everyone's like, nope, we're not answering. We're not going to ask the government any questions. Nope, we don't want to ask. It's like, that should be the most suspicious part to people.
Right.
Not only do people not want to talk about it, they don't want to even ask the government. Like, go ahead, have the government tell me those videos are fake. I dare somebody from the administration to go on TV and say those videos are fake. Dare them. They won't, because they know those videos are real.
Right. Where do you think the plane is?
Best guess, it's in the ocean near Diego Garcia. The people aren't wrong when they say it's in the ocean, just not near where they're looking. Like, that plane went to the west. They teleported it to the west. And because the teleportation's not Star Trek, it's, again, general relativity. It's that it looks like a beam of light to us, but from the plane's perspective, it's still a plane just flying through the sky, like going through a doorway. Like from the plane's perspective, like plasma surrounds it, and then the plasma dissipates, and now it's somewhere else. Like that would be super weird, right? Where you're like in an object, and suddenly like you get encased by something, the lights go out, and then suddenly like you're somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's be like how it would have played out. And then the plane shows up somewhere else in the sky, and it might not have been on fire anymore. Like,
so that was another question, because they basically said that the plane went this way. Then they're like, well, actually, maybe it went this way. Mm-hmm. That's kind of a big difference. Either going west or east.
Well, they lied. They knew it went west. This was the best part. They knew it turned around, and they didn't say anything for like 3 days, which should tell you they were building a cover story. I mean, come on, they were clearly building a cover story.
Well, because they were all looking in the one spot. They were all looking in the one spot too, and then they're like, they were looking. Oh yeah! All of a sudden, we're looking in a completely different.
So they started searching the South China Sea. Then they admitted the plane flew west over Malaysia, and they were tracking on military radar, so they knew the whole time. And then they started searching in the Andaman Sea and the Nicobar Islands. And that's exactly where we have the videos, right there. So they fly the plane over Malaysia, then they go to the Andaman Sea, Nicobar Islands. Now we're looking at videos right there. Now suddenly, days later, after all that, after they changed the story once, they changed the story again. Now they say, oh, the plane took a sharp south turn now and went to the South Indian Ocean. And we know this because United States intelligence-controlled Inmarsat says that we have some satellite pings that suddenly we found out about. We found out about some satellite pings, and now this plane went in the South Indian Ocean. So I'm telling people, this is the easiest cover-up to disprove, or to prove. They literally changed the story multiple times, and the second time they changed the story is when they invented a cover-up, because that's where the plane disappeared, in the Nicobar Islands. Like, literally in the Nicobar Islands right there. That's where we're watching the video, and they were like, oh, this is where the plane went to the South Indian Ocean. So maybe they just... they didn't even try. They were like, they just drew a straight line south for like 5 hours. So not only did the plane go to the South Indian Ocean, the guy just flew the plane straight for 5 hours. Sure, he did. Mm-hmm.
You're right. Yeah.
And we never found the plane, and it crashed into the ocean, and we never found a single piece of the debris from the debris field that would have been miles wide. Well, there would have been 1,000 pounds of flotation devices that would have been floating on the surface of the ocean.
Well, you did have that one guy that everybody said was a con artist that was going out to all those islands picking up, and he would be like, find a piece and be like, oh, this is part of missing Malaysia. Remember that guy from the
Blaine Gibson?
The
funny part is he wasn't a con artist. Like, it was Jeff Wise that was trying to paint him as a con artist, and I think they've made up since then. But it turns out they were trying to paint him as a Russian disinfo guy, because he was finding pieces of the plane, but he was finding them on the wrong continent. If he was finding those pieces of the plane in Australia, nobody would have said anything about it. The reason why people got freaked out is because he was finding debris in Africa. It was the wrong continent. Like, not even remotely close to where they're searching. And it's funny that people just whitewash this and ignore this fact. This is thousands of miles away from where they were searching. And This guy's finding debris on the wrong continent. Suddenly the narrative has to shift. Suddenly they're like, we're going to do some new drift analysis models that will show that this debris could have got to Africa, because all the drift analysis models, you can still see them. They did the models. They had images and everything. Show all the debris should have washed ashore on Australia. All of it. All of it. None of it could have even possibly have made it to Africa in 2 years. You can see the models. They have them on the internet. They changed it all. After they find it, they go, okay, now we're going to do some new models. And now, and it's like, hey, could you throw something in the water and just see if it will wash up in Africa? We could just test this right now and just see if it's true. No, we're not going to do that. We're just going to do models. No actual testing of anything, because there's 0% chance that any of that shit's getting to Africa. So the question is, how did all this debris get to Africa? It's not even that much, by the way. It's like maybe 10 pieces of debris.
It's just like a little piece like this big, yeah.
Yeah. One of them was like a flap. That's the biggest piece. But that you can fly a plane without a flap. Right. Plane wings are 100 feet long. It's a 6-foot piece of the plane wing. So the answer here is that they teleported the plane somewhere closer. The plane went into the water or flew above the water near Africa. And this is where all the conspiracy theorists were saying the plane went to Diego Garcia. Well, that's a really, really good match for the drift analysis of that debris. Diego Garcia is. So we know the CIA was responsible. They got a major military base right there, Diego Garcia, super secret one too.
Yep.
Probably deployed the assets from Diego Garcia for all we know. And the drones specifically probably were deployed from Diego Garcia because those drones have super secret surveillance on them. You're not going to put that on some random island where some random local is going to find that drone, right? It has to
Right.
be in a secret, secure facility. So the drones that were recording were probably deployed from Diego Garcia. The plane probably either landed at Diego Garcia or they just ditched it in the water near there. I imagine the people probably died from the fire. They planted some kind of device on the plane that created a fire diversion. And my guess is it was toxic and it probably killed everybody. But
Hmm.
I have no way of knowing that. So people ask me what they did to the people. I don't even want to speculate. Nothing good. Nothing good,
Yeah.
I imagine.
Yeah. I had a cousin who is a pilot, and he has a theory that they purposely, when they started taking off, they didn't let the plane pressurize properly, so then everybody just clunked out.
Yeah, I looked into that. It doesn't really work though because you only will work at super high altitudes. So low altitudes, you can still breathe under 10,000 feet. And
Oh
in
yeah, that's right.
fact,
You
the
said there was
pilot
like
was,
5,000. You said it was 5,000 feet, right?
yeah, in the videos, he's definitely under 10,000 feet in those videos. So, and also, I speculate that he was flying low when he turned around because he knew there was a fire on the plane. He was trying to air out the plane to get people oxygen
So let me
because
ask
the
you this
oxygen
question:
masks weren't going to work.
if he was flying that low, couldn't he have
Yeah.
also have maybe have dipped off the radar that way because he was flying so
Yeah.
low?
Yes, 100%. And that's actually probably why the radar tracks are not consistent, like why
Hmm.
it drips off. In fact,
Interesting.
that's exactly why I think he was one of the strongest evidence for why he was flying low. And it's also dangerous though because there's some high altitude mountains. I think they go up to around 8,000 feet around that region. I could be wrong on that. You might have to fact check me. But if so, middle of the night, no lights, no
Yeah, that's
power would
dangerous.
have been
Yeah,
super dangerous situation.
yeah,
Super, super dangerous situation. So if somebody comes over the intercom and says, "Hey, this is the U.S. military. Come to this rendezvous point." You're gonna do it. You're
right,
definitely gonna do it in that
right,
situation.
right.
So that's what I think happened. He went to the rendezvous point and I don't know what happened, but I do know that plane teleported to the west. And I know that because it's a directed, aimed beam that they're doing to that plane. That's why the orbs spin around in that very, very specific way, especially at the end, because they're shooting that thing backwards, which means there's a receiver somewhere on the other side. I don't know if it's like three orbs on the other side or just one orb on the other side, or maybe they don't even need anything on the other side. Not sure, but most likely they have some entanglement on this other side so that, and it could be like you said, like you alluded to, the wave function. Like suddenly now the plane is in all these locations, and at that moment the universe has to decide where the plane's going
Where
to
it
be, and
is.
it just cheats and decides it's over here now.
Interesting. That is very
Mhm.
interesting. Well, I appreciate you coming on today. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. It has been awesome. I have
Yep.
been a fan of your work. I told you that, and I'm glad to have you on so you could answer some questions and chat with me about it. So thank you so much for coming on, and I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, Drew.
All right. Well, thank you again. You're the man.
Take it easy.
Bye. All right. So I wanted to just end this one here with a video of what we were just talking about. So people know this one here is on Ashton's site. Check this one out here. But this is the one that we were talking about. If we can get it to go here, here it is. Here's the footage of it. So you can see the plane in the picture here, and that is MH370. Just to show you what we were talking about, and as Ashton just said, this is from a drone, so it's not a satellite view. But you can see the orbs starting to circle the Malaysian airline flight, and as it keeps going and going, you'll see here in a moment that the plane eventually just disappears, just pops out of picture. That was not it yet, though. Here's the plane, and there's the orbs circling the plane, which is super, like, boom, gone. And that is what we were just talking about. I wanted to show you guys that, but that's the footage that's out there, and it's crazy that people are trying to say it's not real, that it's fake, but we know the truth. So, thank you so much for listening this beautiful Saturday. God bless every single one of you, and we will be back next Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. God bless, keep the faith, and get out there and have a great week. Thanks so much, you guys.